The silent house. When Clara received the call from her sister, Mariana, asking for help taking care of the house, she hesitated for a moment. She had just finished a tiring week at work and wanted to use the end of the year to rest in her apartment. However, upon hearing Mariana's hurried voice explaining that her business trip had been confirmed at the last minute, Clara gave in. "It's just for 2 weeks. Besides, you love Max," Mariana insisted, referring to the house cat. Mariana lived in a large, elegant house inherited from their grandparents, perched atop an isolated hill. The place had a peculiar charm, with wide windows that captured sunlight and a porch offering an incredible view of the surrounding trees. It was a house that blended rustic and modern styles, decorated with restored antique furniture and a fireplace that made the space cozy during winter. Clara had always admired the house but never felt completely at ease there. Something about the silence of the place made her uneasy. The last time she had visited her sister, she had the impression that the hallways seemed to stretch longer at night and that the shadows moved when no one was looking. Mariana, on the other hand, loved the isolation and often said the silence helped her focus on her projects. "I promise you'll love it," Mariana assured her while explaining the details over the phone. "You can use anything you need. Take this time to relax and disconnect. It's the perfect place to unwind." Clara sighed, knowing she couldn't refuse. Besides, Max was excellent company. The next day, Clara packed her things and drove to the house. Upon arriving, she was greeted by the familiar sound of Max running to meet her at the door. She petted the cat, who meowed approvingly before grabbing her bags and stepping inside. Mariana had already left early that morning, leaving a note in the kitchen with simple instructions. Feed Max, water the plants on the porch, and make sure all the doors and windows were always locked. Easy, Clara thought as she explored the house. The kitchen was impeccably clean, with a faint aroma of coffee lingering from the morning. Upstairs, the bedrooms were tidy, and the sheets smelled of lavender. Clara chose the smaller guest room near the stairs, thinking it would be easier to keep the heater running efficiently in a smaller space. The fireplace in the main living room was already stocked with firewood, and the TV remote sat invitingly on the table. At first, everything seemed perfect. Clara lit the fireplace, made herself a cup of tea, and settled onto the couch with Max. As she flipped through a book she found on her sister's shelf, she felt relaxed for the first time in weeks. The house had a cozy atmosphere, and the silence, though a bit unsettling, allowed Clara to focus on her thoughts. She began to think that Mariana was right. This place really was a refuge. But as night fell, the silence started to feel oppressive. Sitting in the living room, Clara noticed how the wind outside made the tree branches scrape rhythmically against the windows. Every crackle of the wood in the fireplace made her jump slightly, and she laughed at herself for being so nervous. "It's just an old house," she murmured, trying to calm herself. When she went upstairs to sleep, Max followed her, jumping onto the bed beside her. Clara closed the bedroom door, turned on a bedside lamp, and stayed on her phone for a while until sleep began to take over. But just as she was about to drift off, she heard something. A muffled sound, distant, coming from downstairs. It wasn't the wind or the creaking wood. It sounded more solid, as if someone had dropped an object. Clara sat up slowly, listening intently. Max was alert, ears perked, staring intently at the door. "Probably nothing," she whispered, trying to reassure herself. Yet the unease grew. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door and went down the stairs, each step creaking under her feet. The living room was just as she had left it, empty and still. The fire in the fireplace was still glowing faintly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Clara checked the kitchen and dining room, but everything seemed normal. "I'm imagining things," she muttered, heading back upstairs. But as she closed the door behind her, she heard it again. A bam, clear and close, coming from beneath her feet. That's when she realized. The sound was coming from the basement. Clara froze, her heart racing. "It's just the wind, or something falling off the shelves," she tried to justify. Even so, she locked the bedroom door and buried herself under the covers with Max. The cat was agitated, but she chose to ignore it. That night, Clara barely slept, waking up at every small sound. And for the first time, she realized that the silence her sister loved so much wasn't an invitation to peace, but a warning. Days went by, and Clara tried to return to her routine, but something was wrong. Ever since she left Mariana's house, it felt like a shadow was following her. In her apartment, the silence that was once a rare luxury now felt oppressive. Max, usually fearless, spent hours hiding under the bed or in the closet, and Clara began noticing small, unsettling details. A window she was certain she had closed was slightly ajar. A chair in the living room seemed to shift positions, and at night, when she turned off the lights, she swore she could hear faint creaks in the hallway. One day, while doing a deep cleaning to distract herself, Clara found something that made her blood run cold. Behind the bedroom wardrobe, partially covered in dust, was the note Mariana had left in the kitchen on the day she departed. "This can't be. I left this note at her house." Clara looked at Max, who stared back at her with wide eyes, as if he too sensed the strangeness of the moment. Trying to dismiss her growing unease, Clara called Mariana, but the call went straight to voicemail. "Mariana, I just wanted to check in. Call me when you can, okay?" she said. As she spoke, she noticed something in the reflection of her phone screen. Behind her, in the hallway mirror, a shadow seemed to shift. Clara spun around quickly, but there was nothing there. Just the faint light of late afternoon streaming through the window. That night, Clara had a nightmare. She dreamed she was back in the hidden corridor at Mariana's house, but this time, it seemed endless. As she walked, the walls pressed closer around her, and the footsteps behind her grew louder, closer. At the end of the corridor, the circular room reappeared, but now, the figure in the chair was standing, its back to her. When Clara tried to run, her feet wouldn't move. The figure turned slowly, and its face, or lack of it, was the same she had seen before. But this time it whispered, "You shouldn't have come back." Clara woke up gasping for air, drenched in sweat. The clock read 3:33 a.m. She tried to calm herself, but then she heard something that made her heart pound. A faint creak coming from the living room. Max, who had been sleeping beside her, perked his ears and began growling softly. Clara grabbed her phone and went to the bedroom door, pressing her ear against it. The sound was clearer now, footsteps. Someone was walking slowly through her apartment. "That's impossible. I locked everything," she stammered. She grabbed a knife she had placed in the kitchen a few days earlier and held it tightly in her trembling hands. Carefully, she unlocked the door and stepped into the hallway. It was dark, but Clara could make out a figure standing in the corner of the living room, near the window. She held her breath, but before she could move, the figure slowly turned its head toward her. It was the same featureless face she had seen in the circular room, but this time, it was sharper, almost human. Clara stumbled backward, trying to retreat to her bedroom, but the floor felt unstable, as if it were sinking. The environment around her began to change. The apartment walls stretched, the furniture vanished, and in the blink of an eye, Clara realized she was no longer home. She was back in the dark corridor of Mariana's house. "No, this isn't real. I got out of here," she screamed, her voice echoing against the stone walls. The sound of footsteps returned, louder, more urgent. She ran, but the corridor seemed endless. At every turn, Clara caught glimpses of what had happened. The chair in the center of the room, the scratch marks on the walls, the hooded figure destroying the house. She stopped, gasping for breath, and tried to find her bearings, but the corridor seemed alive, pulsing around her. "You shouldn't have come back," the voice whispered again, but this time, it seemed to come from inside her head. Clara screamed, covering her ears, but the sound only grew louder. Finally, she saw a light ahead, the basement door. She sprinted toward it with all her strength, feeling the presence behind her drawing closer with every step. When she reached the door, she threw her body against it and collapsed to her knees in Mariana's living room. The room was in chaos, furniture smashed, glass shattered, but something was wrong. On the couch sat a woman, motionless, staring at the fireplace. Clara approached slowly, her heart nearly stopping. It was Mariana. But her sister was pale, her eyes wide and glassy as if frozen in time. "Mariana?" Clara whispered, shaking her sister's shoulder, but there was no response. That's when she noticed something in Mariana's hand, a crumpled piece of paper. Clara carefully pulled it free and read the words written in frantic handwriting. "He doesn't want the house. He wants you." Before she could react, the lights in the house flickered and went out. A deep sound, like a heavy thud, came from the basement. And then, in the most absolute silence, Clara felt cold breath on the back of her neck. She tried to run but couldn't. The last thing she saw was the reflection in the window, her own face, but with the same featureless void as the figures. And then everything went dark. Days later, the police found Mariana's house completely empty. Neither Clara nor Mariana was anywhere to be found. Everything was destroyed except for one object, a mirror in the center of the living room, seemingly untouched. Anyone who looked into it reported feeling something strange, as if something or someone was watching from the other side.